US Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has announced he will terminate hundreds of millions of dollars earmarked for tackling infections like COVID and the flu using mRNA vaccines and treatments. Public health experts say the move will impact the country's ability to fight future pandemics and is built on false or misleading claims about the technology. Epidemiologist Professor Catherine Bennett from Deakin University joins us now. Now, Professor, firstly, what reasons have been given by the Trump administration in their decision to terminate the funding to develop mRNA vaccines and treatments?
Well, there really hasn't been very specific reasons given. The general statement is that the Secretary no longer believes that the benefits outweigh the risks, particularly for respiratory or upper respiratory tract infections, naming COVID and influenza in particular, basically implying that he's following the science, but it's actually not what the science says. So I think it's one of the big concerns, because it was a great advance through the pandemic to see these technologies really come to the fore and actually deliver a really important part of our response to the pandemic that saw many more people survive around the world than otherwise would have.
Now, for those that may not know, what are mRNA vaccines and how do they work, and how integral were they, especially during the COVID pandemic?
So there are a few different types of vaccines, and this particular one was unusual in the sense that you're not injecting the human with either deactivated or weakened viruses, for example. What you're doing is actually injecting this mRNA, these fragments of RNA that actually train the human cells to produce the antigens, not the whole virus, but just parts of it that then train the immune system to recognise the virus and be able to fight it off. So doing that meant you didn't have the risk of having live virus injected into people, but you ended up seeing situations where people had enough protection from the immunity they developed from the vaccine to be much less likely to have either severe disease or to die from the infection. So that was the important development. This was a type of vaccine that they were developing for a whole range of reasons, including trying to fight cancer. And so, really smart technology. And to have seen it get up as quickly was really important. That time to development made some people anxious, but actually it shows how important this technology is, where you can get the sequencing of a pathogen like the COVID virus and then use that to build these vaccines quite quickly. You don't have to grow it up in the lab and do all that production or using chicken eggs like they have in the past. This is a different way to develop these vaccines that were very effective, safe. They had very rare side effects, and the benefits certainly well outweighed the risks. So it'd be a real problem to be facing future pandemics if you didn't have the same research behind it to be able to generate these vaccines quickly to actually bring these pandemics under control.
Can I dig further into that point you just pointed out in terms of future pandemics? What impact could this have on, future health emergencies, pandemics and other diseases such as like the bird flu maybe?
Well, we started hearing about, these 100 days from having a new pathogen identified and sequenced, so doing that genetic sequencing, to then having a usable tested vaccine. And that's something we couldn't have dreamed of in the past. So that was the promise that was coming out of this technology over the last pandemic. Part of the funding cuts, so this is $500 million we're talking about that's just being announced in these last days, but a little while ago they already withdrew $500 million from investment in Moderna, who are producing one of these mRNA vaccines, as you say, against the bird flu. So this is H5N1, circulating widely in the US. It's through their cattle industry as well as their wild birds, and it's been devastating their flocks of poultry as well. So here we have a real risk, more humans coming in contact with this all the time, and it's that recombination of a bird flu virus and the human virus then creates a new human virus that looks very different to the seasonal flu we know. And that's when you can get quite serious illness. That's what's led to past flu pandemics. So again, having these vaccines at the ready, watching what's circulating in the animal kingdom, and then finding those mRNA responses that we could have quite quickly, and we could adapt them to the specific type of maybe human combined bird flu virus that that appears and starts a pandemic, we could be on top of that very quickly. But this withdrawing of those funds and now a further $500 million worth of investment is really quite devastating. And it will have flow-on effects to other uses for mRNA vaccines, as I said, including fighting cancer and other things as well.
Will that funding cut also have flow-on effects to other countries?
Yeah, so America isn't the only place that's producing vaccines. They did invest a lot through the last pandemic with their Warp Speed program. Other countries have some capability. You know, Australia has its own capability in this space now. So but it was a really substantial part of the global investment in mRNA. And both Moderna and Pfizer, two companies people will know the names of, but others as well, have had this funding cut. So it will be a global impact. Might mean that some of this work then shifts out of America and other countries might step up the investment, but that always takes a bit of time, and it does then lead to a bit of a lag in terms of how we progress. We're watching closely what's happening with the avian influenza in the US. It would be devastating if a country that's cutting back on its surveillance of disease might be also losing control of these outbreaks and now could be having an effect on the way the world might respond should something emerge in America. It's sort of all these things lining up in a way that's really quite concerning from a global health perspective.
Meanwhile, we've seen a surge in cases of Chikungunya virus in China. Now, normally this is found in Southeast Asian countries. Do we know why this has turned up there, and should we be worried?
Yeah, it's unusual to see these sorts of outbreaks in China. They've now reported more than 8,000 cases. Originally, it was found 75 years ago in Africa, but has progressively moved around the world. I think 100 countries have now reported cases. You're right, we see it in other countries. There's cases in Sri Lanka at the moment. It really depends where the mosquito is that's responsible for the spread of this particular virus. So the mosquitoes, there's two mosquitoes that are involved. One of them is the same mosquito that can spread dengue fever, for example. So countries that have those Aedes mosquitoes have the potential to spread the disease should there be enough infected people in the country. So a combination of seasonal conditions that have a lot of mosquitoes around, and if you have one or more infected cases that gets bitten, then the mosquito bites other people who aren't infected but infects them. That's how this virus spreads. So they're working really hard to try and stop that person-to-person spread via these mosquito vectors in China. And they're actually taking it very seriously. They're isolating people that they find with the infection, and then taking great care to protect them from mosquitoes so that they won't be the source of other infections in other people. And they're also trying to get everybody to get rid of those mosquito breeding grounds and all the things that might have seen an unusual outbreak because the conditions were right for a lot of mosquitoes to be breeding close to homes and then picking up the virus from one person and spreading it to the next.
Now, the virus has appeared on every populated continent except Australia. Now, should we be worried? Could it spread here?
Well, as we watched it move across the Western Pacific 15 years ago, 10 years ago, we were very worried it could be here. We know we've got the mosquito. The Aedes aegypti mosquito is already in northern Queensland, so we do see the cases of dengue associated with that particular mosquito. Thankfully, we haven't had enough people here infected who brought it in, travelled to Australia while they were early in their infection. That's when they're the greatest risk. They have a high viral load. It's more likely that the virus will get picked up if a mosquito bites them. So the combination of mosquito control, but also being a bit lucky and not having enough people land here in that early stage of their illness to be a source for a local outbreak has been really important. It is a notifiable disease here, though. We don't want to see it turn up and then us not know until it's already quite well established. So the important thing is to detect cases early should anyone arrive, but managing our mosquito control is a really important way to protect ourselves from a range of those mosquito-borne infections. So far so good, but we must, always stay alert, and that's what the authorities are looking at to make sure that we don't increase our risk of having people arrive in Australia who might be unwell, particularly in the northern parts where the mosquitoes are already in our environment.
Professor Catherine Bennett, thank you for your time.
Thank you.